Hello, Sandboxers. It seems like we've gotten another new update blog post for September. As I already mentioned, that it would be happening in October, so let's just get right into it. So starting off with scene maps, Gary mentions currently, while you can create maps in Hammer, you aren't able to add any functionality like doors, buttons, hurt triggers, or logic. With scene maps, scenes can be published and loaded as maps. These map projects can also target specific games, which means you can create maps with components that the game has programmed. And by pressing play, you can play the scene in the game right away. Gary also has been testing this new template when you create a new project in S&box, which allows you to create an add-on project and give you a scene showing you how to do things in it. Gary also mentions that while this does leave Hammer out a bit, their intention is to get this right in the scene system so that it'll work in Hammer too. Moving on next to Animgraph Parameters, you're able to preview and edit animation parameters in real time through the inspector. Laylad mentions for the future that they want to have an option to save these so they can be animated and used again in the Movie Maker. A new S&box game has been made for Facepunch, and it's called Memory Quest. Dedicated to using your memory and power of deduction to match cards, it's a roguelike puzzle game, which is really cool. Gary has finally added the ability for developers to add achievements to their games. These achievements can be locked manually or through stat values. And there's also a gamer score, which is also displayed under your avatar image on S&box. As Gary mentions, the gamer with the highest score at the end of the year is the best in the world, so probably best time to get that gamer score up. So it seems like Action Graphs also got a new facelift. Gary did a big reskin to make everything less dull, and Zix has used his feedback to make everything more compact and less redundant. Scene reference nodes also have thumbnails, which are cool and show the exact target object that you're using, as shown right here. So when it comes to the Steam store page, Gary mentions that they've tried to get a Steam page up and running, but unfortunately they haven't heard a response from the reviewers requiring them to submit a full build of S&box, which they did 3 weeks ago. Right now, we're unsure if we'll get an announcement through the Twitter S&box page or Discord's announcement channel for this one, since it could probably go up any day now. Moving on to map stats and achievements, published maps can set up their own stats and achievements. It'll be up to the map maker on how these features will be used and for which map it's targeting. Gary mentions again on how the intention of this is to make it properly work in scenes than in Hammer. So integrating this into the same system will be the end goal. Now, this is definitely a big one, and I mentioned this in the last video that covered specifically for people like me, and also with some great news for some people that might be interested in this. Morph Editing. We've got an official Morph Editor in the S&box editor, which allows you to change up the facial expressions for your characters that you use. Gary mentions that he's been taking off stuff needed to make for the actual S&box mode, and Morph Editing was one of them. All right, so let's go into a lightning round where I go through a majority of the other features that are here that we can just kind of sum up all together. So there's a new .sandbox folder in projects for project-specific temp files and caches. Physics are enabled into the editor, and there's a tool that was made to grab them. Playing from the sandbox.game website, so a play button that launches S&box from your web browser through Steam and takes you directly to the game that you picked. Cloud assets got changed to prevent breaking after a while with big projects, so you can manually update them to prevent from future game-breaking bugs. And last but not least, an update with the standalone exporting. One of S&box's staple features is things are looking good, and while nothing is still official yet according to Gary, Facepunch and Valve are still talking about it. Moving on down to the summary. Gary mentions that lots of improvements are happening every week and within the last month. While things are getting refined, one of the biggest challenges again is keeping players online. And according to Gary, the only real way the platform can work is if it's getting a consistent amount of players. Gary also mentions that this is something that they don't have right now, and while Facepunch has made a fun editor to make games in, Gary mentions that this is something that they don't have right now, and while they've made a fun editor to make games in, there doesn't seem to be anything that is keeping lots of players online consistently yet. Also, Gary states that he's been stressing on this for the past month or so, but he's mentioned that he's been working so much on the editor that they actually have to get the game to work properly now. With my closing thoughts, this is going to be a little bit of a yap sesh, but some people are going to agree with me, some people are not going to agree with me. That's fine. I love S&box. I love everything about it and what it provides and what it brings. And I understand that with this specific issue that Gary is having, it makes sense, right? Ever since S&box originally opened up to the public, that was a massive wave of people that took out the time to go and download the game and get their hands on it. And during that time, of course, there was tons of people that were saying, oh, Gary's Mod 2 is out and all this other stuff, making people freak the hell out and go and download the game and see and try the game out and see what's going on. This was met with a ton, and I mean a ton, of negative response due to how rough the game was in terms of the state it was in, because of course it's still being developed, and understandably so. But at the same time, a lot of games were not working. There was tons of things that were broken with the game at the time, and a lot of people were very upset because they thought, this is it. Again, very early, a lot of people are not going to care about that. They just hear one thing, they're going to go off to the basis, jump on the game and say, hey, this is it, let's go, we're hyped. Consistent player counts and having people on your platform is an issue. Obviously, it's the forbidden thing that I prevent to say, because apparently it's just such a hot topic on S&box, which is the S&box game mode, right? I understand S&box is more than that. S&box is nothing like Gary's Mod, to be completely honest. Some people will say it is. I disagree. It's not. It's really not. I know in the past I've mentioned it, but whatever. This is something that is very important to making this game succeed or fail, is having players. And unfortunately, the one thing you're going to have to bite the bullet on is making sure that the S&box game mode is a thing. This is something, in my opinion, that I think will keep people around, obviously, because people are interested in the game, but they're also interested in just having the S&box mode. Yes, I understand people are going to play the game and they're also going to only stick on the S&box mode, but at the same time, some people are going to get bored and probably going to check out other things that are available on the platform. Why? Because there's a ton of other games. While it is unfortunate to hear that Gary is stressing out about this, he also understands that when it comes to the game itself, this is the most important thing, is making the game work and making it work to a point where people are consistently on the game. And if this is one of the things that it has to be, which is the S&box mode, while I know some people may not agree, it is something that is very vital. It is very vital for this game. Otherwise, people are not going to care about it in this way. And I know not everyone's gonna not care about it that way, but in terms of making the game work, this is one of them. Again, if you feel like there is anything you think that would work when it comes to this specifically, please let me know in the comments below. Of course, subscribe to the channel if you want to keep up to date with anything S&box, where I'm covering games, I'm covering S&box, I'm doing a whole bunch of stuff. So thank you guys so much for watching. Feel free to check out this video right here. I'll see you next time.